My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, Pride is done, but we're still kind of celebrating a little bit. But now here we are right up on 4th of July and freedoms, and where are we at with all our freedoms in the world as gay men or the LGBTQ community as a whole. But one of the things that we don't often talk about is the freedom to really go dig in and take good care of our mental health. And I know for some of you, it's like, I don't want to listen to this. Well, I'm going to invite you to step in. I'm going to invite you to step in and realize when we take good care of our mental health, no matter what age you're at, you're going to be a better person in your life for yourself and for everyone around you. And I really wanted to have this conversation with my guest today, who is Lucas Saiter, the founder and director of Manhattan Therapy NYC. And he's also an adjunct instructor in the Department of Psychology at NYU. So who better than to help us unpack some of our mental health stuff than someone who's in this on a daily basis? He does group practice stuff. He focuses on strengthening your identity. He does do a lot of work in the Latinx community and just in, across the board. And I felt like having this conversation about anxiety, depression, all these things that seem to continue to mount, yet sometimes we as gay men, because of how we've been socialized, are like, no, I can handle it. I just got to take care of myself. Well, I hope we can break some of those myths today. So welcome Lucas Saiter to the podcast to start helping us unpack some of this. So thanks for being here, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So what got you into this work? I always like starting there. Like there had to have been some compelling reason that you wanted to be, doing this kind of work and helping our community out in this way.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, for me, it's actually somewhat personal. I think seeing, immigrating to the US when I was really young, seeing how oppressive various systems were, both with my family, the communities that I was a part of. And particularly with men, with gay men, I mean, both with myself and also what I was seeing around me. Again, that those marginalized groups, I think, that oftentimes don't have access to talk to someone, especially a professional. Depending on cultures where you come from, it's actually sometimes seen as rude or disrespectful to sort of talk about any personal issues outside of the family system. So I really wanted to bridge the gap. I really wanted to offer and really explore where do some of these themes come from, these messages that I think we're often told at a really young age. Where do some of these things come from? How do we learn these, and how can we maybe start to unlearn some of those pieces? So started really young, and I thought I was going to go into medicine and go down that route and offer
Right.
care in that way. And over time, I actually started to realize, no, the work I want to do is more emotional and more sort of one-to-one, really kind of slowed things down. And that's how I found the world of therapy and psychology.
It's interesting that you bring up that piece of, the disrespect and rude to talk about these things. I went through that as a young gay man. More around the sexual abuse arena. That's like, okay, well, we're aware of it, but we're not going to talk about it. We're going to take care of the situation. And it eventually did get taken care of, but that pebble in the shoe carried forward. It's still there at times. I can feel that come up like, oh, don't talk about this, except I'm very open about talking about most everything in my world. But it took a long time, Lucas, for me to like shake that quote shame and guilt around, that, because we're not going to talk about this. We don't want anybody to know. And I've seen this over and over in our LGBTQ community, but especially with gay men. It seems almost seems more prevalent for men, even though I know I'm not going to say our lesbian sisters and transgender family don't experience that either. But there's something about the masculine energy and being told, don't talk about that it just carries forward, What do you think is one of the things that can help someone who's like, I don't want to talk about this to even take potentially that first step of feeling, okay, there's nothing wrong with me because I want to share this.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I think, where we see a lot of media that I think portrays seeking help in a very specific way, and oftentimes it looks very medical, very clinical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I try to do some of this work too, and especially with clients who come to see me and it's their first time in therapy, and really try to demystify what therapy looks like, how it can be for person to person. I think it can be very personalized for each client. So, it really starting to break down some of the barriers of what therapy can look like and what getting help can look like. And, it's interesting you brought up, keeping things sort of putting a lid on things, right? Keeping
Mm-hmm.
things hidden or concealed. It's interesting trying to unpack some of that with clients where, I talk a lot about vulnerability being a source of strength. And oftentimes, we think about even just emotional expression as a way to connect with other people. And
Right.
so, how can we actually transform vulnerability as almost a superpower rather than something to be shamed or repressed or something like that? So, I think oftentimes just talking about it with people who support you, people that are in your community, and sometimes that can be within the family or with friends. Not always, not everyone has that luxury of having really supportive friends and family, but really reaching out to the people who do support you, people in your own community. And again, I oftentimes, share, talk to, get on consultations with therapists, talk to various people, get people on the
Mm-hmm.
phone, just try and actually get some experience with. And I think oftentimes people are surprised by how casual it can be, how
Mm-hmm.
supportive it can be, and it's not this sort of scary clinical experience.
Right. I also find it interesting how much the pandemic experience actually even drove this
Mhm.
further into, okay, well, I just got to do this on my own. And so I'd love for you to kind of comment from your perspective. I know I saw it as a coach. Like suddenly people are like, nope, I'll just do this because hey, I'm learning to be isolated. But it actually, in my mind, had the counter effect. So I'm curious
Mhm.
what your thoughts are.
Yeah, there was a silver lining, I think, that I often talk about with the pandemic that, it shut everything down, right? And for a lot of people, I think they sort of shut down within themselves. And, that was, I think, a struggle for a lot of people in various ways. And there was an opening, I think, that we noticed too, because of telehealth
Mm-hmm.
and ways of connecting, not just with a professional, but with family, with friends. People were able to get on a screen now in a much different way. I remember I was just talking to a client actually about this. I remember, before the pandemic, virtual calls were for conference meetings, they were for businesses, right?
Yep.
These corporations. And that was almost it. And even then, right, you had to sort of set up a whole day, right, to plan this out. And now there's just such an ease and accessibility, I think, because of, we're able to connect like this, right,
Yep.
on a screen. And I think that's really opened the doors for a lot of people.
I'm curious if you find as a therapist if it's created a barrier to some degree by doing it this way or it's actually opened things up. I have certain people who are like, yeah, I just need to be in a room with someone. I'm like, I'm totally
Hmm.
get that. I have been, but for the bulk of my coaching practice since 2009, I would say 95% of my experience has been in this kind of a medium. Used to be
Hmm.
on phone, and then became the video sort of stuff. Do you see it as a barrier? Do you find some people are just like, oh, I want to come into your office and I want to have that time because maybe they just don't feel comfortable on camera.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact I've gotten people, who reached out because I offer in-person services. So again, I think there's a silver lining, there's sort of pros and cons to both. I know that
Yeah,
even people who I see in person, they often say, it just feels different, right? Being in person with another human
sure.
being. And I can
Absolutely.
totally relate to that. And that, again, this having this medium, gives the opportunity for folks who maybe would never had have even thought to seek professional help of any kind, or
Mhm.
to connect with someone in this way. So I think in that sense, I think it's helped a lot of people really make that connection and try something that they maybe wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, I feel like it is. It's kind of a I don't want to say a double-edged sword. There's like, as you said, the silver lining. There's some positive
Yeah.
to it, there's some negative to it. I it was interesting. I was working with a client not long ago, and he said, I wish we could meet in person. I'm like, well, you you live in Texas, I live in California, so that's probably not going to happen, right? But there is that piece of, yes, I would love to meet him too. In fact, I just saw one of my clients. I was recently in New York City, where you live,
Hmm.
and one of my clients that I worked with clear back in 2014, probably 13 or 14. Um, we've stayed in touch, but he came into the city from Philadelphia. He's like, I just want to see you. I want to see you again. Because we did meet one time. We met one time when we first started working together. I happened to be in Philadelphia. And there is something about that human connectedness. But I also sometimes almost think like having this medium, it's like, well, then I never need to leave my house. I don't need
Hmm.
to, so there's the negative. It's like, oh, we just added to, anybody who's already an introvert going, oh, well, I can do this. I'm more curious though, what do you feel has been some of the reasons that clients literally are like, I didn't think I'd ever come into therapy. I mean, we know there's like too clinical. We've already talked about that. I think access is a huge thing.
Hmm.
So many people struggle with the access. What are some of the biggest barriers that are preventing people who may need, I hate to use that word, need or want therapy, to getting them into the therapeutic world these days?
Yeah, I think oftentimes there's a systemic issue too, right? That
Mm,
and it's sort of invisible, right? We don't necessarily see it. It's not as maybe tangible in some ways. So, I think oftentimes cost is another big issue, right?
mm-hmm,
That, it's a service, of course, and we go through all this training, right? So we have to make a living too, and that it can be really expensive, especially when we're thinking about insurance, right? Oftentimes insurance doesn't cover certain services. um, Even it's unfortunate, we're seeing this more and more over the last few months. Insurances are actually not covering the cost of telehealth services
mm-hmm.
specifically, sort of forcing people to actually come into the office. And again, if they're not close, or scheduling really makes it challenging for them to come in, there goes the opportunity, right? There goes their access to the service. So, it's unfortunate that I think there's still many systems in place that actually create barriers, that are masking themselves, right, as trying to help their members, but are actually causing more and more barriers. So I think cost is another big issue that we often see.
Well, and I think what you just brought up also drives the systemic issue of, okay, so you want to drive everybody to try to come into an office. Well, then you can't get an appointment for 6, 7 months down the road, and that
Yeah.
and that doesn't help things either. So I'm a big advocate of the more we can do Zoom, whatever it is, make it accessible. Yes, that doesn't necessarily help the cost issue piece, but I also feel like if you really are trying to find the help, you can get it. You may have to do a little bit of extra work. I know another therapist that I talked to, their rates are very reasonable for the cash out of hand. And even when I was doing therapy years ago, uh, I paid the cash rate because it's like that's better than, waiting for the insurance to grant me, what
Hmm.
I could get. But again, we have to be understanding to there are people who don't have that privilege that I just described, cash on hand and
Hmm.
insurance. So I'm curious, as a community or profession, are you starting to see more professional therapists going, okay, how can we help combat this and get more people by fluctuating rates, by obviously insurance is a whole nightmare. Let's just go there.
Hmm.
But what are some of the things you're seeing the industry as a whole going, how can we help solve this issue?
Yeah, I think as a profession in general, I think many of us want to, of course, again, still make a living and be able to offer services to people who really maybe need it.
Right.
And I think one way of doing that is offering pro bono slots. So, even within my schedule, I have some time slots that I reserve for pro
Mhm.
bono cases. We offer sliding scale services as well.
Yep.
So, depending on the client, depending on their income, their means, what resources they may have, offering an opportunity to slide the fee down to a rate that's more reasonable for them.
Yep.
So, we try to, again, work within the system, right, and still be able to offer that accessibility while, again, still making a living. But
Mhm.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is hard. It's really hard to juggle because again, we're trying to make a living too. I mean, that's the thing. And my heart always goes out, and I will come down to a certain point, but at a certain point I'm like, this doesn't just doesn't work for me. And I hate to
Hmm.
say it that way, but I have to be a business owner as well as a very compassionate human. And sometimes those two can kind of conflict a little bit when you're in this
Hmm.
space. However, for all that being said, I would really like to dig into like what are some of the most common issues, challenges you're seeing, especially let's just start with gay men, since that's where we both are operating from, that just are really showing up. I know since the pandemic, connection, loneliness has just
Hmm.
gone through the roof. What else are you seeing?
Yeah, anxiety seems to be, I think, affecting a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
even more now. And again, I think this is maybe something that whether it went up because of the pandemic, or maybe it's just that we're noticing it more now. But I'm noticing that, a lot of folks that I'm working with are experiencing anxiety to some extent. And I think a big part of that is the social connection, right? How we're connecting with people now versus maybe before 2020, right? Um, and, I think because of the social isolation that I think is affecting so many people, we're also seeing more depression too. People,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, right? So this is the sort of bittersweet that we talked about earlier, that people are at home more right now, especially that we know that so much of the work that we do, whether you're at a big company, a smaller company, a startup, um, a lot of that work can be done from home, right? And so that's really convenient, and
Right.
it can really shut people down, right? And keep people in, when as humans we're social creatures, right? We're meant to
Mm-hmm.
be connected with people. We're meant to be outside, connected with nature.
Yeah.
So it's created some challenges for sure.
Well, and it's a huge factor if you are really accustomed to this. So, like, my entire life is right here where I'm sitting having this interview. This is where my whole life, from a professional perspective, happens.
Hmm.
And there are days, Lucas, I've got to be just really, really careful. Like, oh, okay, I got up, I did my Peloton exercise, so I didn't have to go anywhere to do that. Then I come in, I start working. Didn't have to do that. Then I work for another company as well. So between the other company, who is 100% virtual, and my own
Mm.
practice that is 100% virtual, sometimes my husband has come on and goes, "Did you leave the house today?" I'm like, "No." "What, do you want to go for a walk?" "No." He goes, You need to do something, right?" And it's very interesting to go. There was a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't really left the house in like 2 days. But
Hmm.
I could feel my own mental health, not that I'm screwed up and fucked up, guys. I'm just saying I could feel my own mental health. Things were starting to really weigh on me. And even though I'm doing exercise, I'm riding my Peloton bike, doing the exercise, strength trainings and all that, there is something about when you don't get out and be social, even
Hmm.
if it's just to go be in a grocery store, guys. You need that, like, oh, I feel like I'm part of, to move it along. But so
Hmm.
many men, and I'm not just saying gay men, but just there's a lot of gay men who isolate, and then they really struggle to come out of it. And I've seen the anxiety and the depression like really tick up. And
Hmm.
I probably in the last year have done more referrals to therapists than I've ever done in my whole coaching, because there's a certain level I can take them to, but when I'm like, oh, this is deep seated, hands off. Not that I
Hmm.
want to dump somebody, but I want them in the right place. But then, of course, as soon as I try to do that handoff, sometimes they're like, well, yeah, but then I've got to wait for all these months and da da da. I'm like, yes, but
Hmm.
that's what you truly need. So, I've worked with a lot of my clients to like, let's find the solution. Let's really find a
Hmm.
solution that works for you. Is there anything in particular that, and those of you that are just listening to the podcast, not maybe watching this on YouTube, are there certain special circumstances that you have found that really are affecting the Latino men in particular?
Yeah, it's sort of I know we're talking a lot about with gay men in particular and how we're socialized, right, to keep things in. I think there's this sort of subsection of that community, right, and that's Latinx men who
Mhm.
I think get even more of that pressure. And a big part of it is the machismo that, we're often taught, men have to be strong, right? And men have to be
Mhm.
resilient, let alone, showing any sort of emotion or expressing it outwardly. That's not necessarily anger, right? So,
Mhm.
I think it's impacting Latinx men in particular who, come from a family system or a culture that oftentimes says, as a man, you have to have it all together, right? And to my point earlier, I think it's really starting to, unpack, especially with the current generation, really starting to unpack that. What does that really mean? And, is that actually serving us? And I think we're seeing how correlated, having these sort of repressed feelings, right, and keeping things sort of internalized, how that can really show up in these symptoms, right? This feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling isolated. And we really want to start to unpack, right, that vulnerability is a source of strength. I think that can be something really transformational for people,
Mm.
especially with Latinx men.
I'm going to repeat that because I don't want that one to go by. Vulnerability is a form of strength, and I think
Yeah.
oftentimes it's seen as such. I mean, this is Brene Brown has built so much of all of her body work around this. To me, vulnerability. Okay, I'm going to just be really little straightforward and crass here. To me, vulnerability is one of the biggest turn-ons for me
Mm.
that attracts me to men. I mean, I guess I have a husband, but when he's vulnerable, I just like I love him more. I kind of get horny, so I'm just gonna be really weird about that. But there's a sexiness to it because that means that
Hmm.
there's a releasing, there's an accepting, there's a okay, I am allowing myself to say this is who I am. And for all of our beautiful coming out journeys to say this is who I am, I don't think many of us realize how long getting past that hiding who we are has been that huge boulder in our shoes that continues to show up. And then you take and layer in the Latino culture and a lot of times heavy religious culture in that space,
Hmm.
plus the machismo, and you're supposed to be the breadwinner and da da da. I mean, yes, most men experience it, but I've seen it really in particular in those spaces. Also in Asian culture in a different way. The Asian culture
Hmm.
has a similar but very almost like it's more family bound. You do this because you're supposed to do this for
Hmm.
your family, which Latino is this very much very similar. I mean, a lot of it is the family name, and this is how to be respected. As you brought up, the generational thing is also interesting to me because I feel
Hmm.
like what your generation is experiencing versus what my boomer generation now experiences, there's like older queens. I'm just going to go there. Older gay men. Okay. Some of you love queens. Others like, don't call me an old gay queen. I'm just going to say older gay men. We kind of look at the younger generation and go, y'all have it so easy. That's usually when I do the head nod. Like, again, those of you who are watching this on YouTube, I'm like, well, yes and no, because they still have the same challenges. It's more free,
Hmm.
it's more accepted, but I feel like even the younger generations, the Gen Zs, the Gen X, the millennials, all those are actually struggling in similar ways. But I think there's other things that are cropping up. What are some of the things you're seeing in the younger generation that are actually contributing to the anxiety, the depression, that suddenly old queens are like, you got it easy. You can at least be out and not hiding, right? What are some of those things you're seeing, man?
Yeah, I think the younger generation, they're trying to sort of break out of these cycles, and
Mm-hmm.
I think oftentimes met with so much resistance from, again, you brought up family and even religion, right? These sort of older traditional mindsets that, I think there's a lot of power that can come from that too, especially when we think about tradition in various cultures, and that there's oftentimes again, a resistance or a rigidness that I see a lot of my clients experience, for example, with their parents, or uncles, aunts, right, extended family, that makes it really challenging, right? That in many ways, again, the younger generation maybe has a little bit more of a free experience or a freeing experience to sort of live as themselves authentically in the world, and then they come home and they're faced with this resistance, right, or this pressure to be or to fit a certain role that their family understands them to be. So I oftentimes see that, especially with the sort of current generation.
And I think what's interesting is it's the same challenges, but there's a lot
Hmm.
more assumptions that actually, and I have quite a few younger, acquaintances, and we've got into these conversations. Same challenges that we as elders in the community faced. I mean, I didn't come out till I was 36. So, I was playing around with it since 19, but finally did it.
Hmm.
Religion, family pressure, all the same stuff. But what's different is now in the palm of our hands is this, oh, look, everybody else can be out and proud. So the younger generation's like, oh, look, here's this person at a pride event, or here's somebody who's like, I'm just authentically being me and out. So now suddenly that is actually catapulting because like it's all in your hands 24/7 of seeing
Hmm.
somebody else being able to be who they are. And you're like, I really want to do that. But my pebbles are the big pebbles that have always been there. But now there's that added pressure of like the comparison game of every Instagram
Hmm.
quote influencer out there in the world, so to speak, or TikToker or whatever. And that to me just catapults that pressure and that anxiety. My generation didn't see it
Yeah.
because we didn't have, I mean, I guess the only place we saw it would be, oh, you go show up at a gay barn. Like, I mean, I remember the first time I went into a gay, not first time I went, but after I came out, my best friend took me to a gay bar in Laguna Beach and introduced me to all these guys. Because I'm a diva, I thought I was the only gay guy who'd ever been married to a woman and had children, right? Oh my God, that night I met so many guys who were in the same shoes. I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? But that's the only place we could, quote, see that representation. This younger generation, they can see it everywhere in the palm of their hands.
Hmm.
And I think that's contributing to some of this mental health issue as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's a silver lining, right? Like we were saying
Mm-hmm.
earlier, that, there's, I think, a movement of being out and proud that I think, again, we saw with older generations that sort of transformed, right, or evolved in the current generation, where out and proud is very out, right, and
Mm-hmm.
very open. We see it on so many social media platforms, and that also brings in comparison. I oftentimes share with some of my clients. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? Or the thief of mindfulness, right? The moment we start comparing ourselves to other people, we start to sort of rob or take the things that we really find authentic and our own. We start to take those things away. And, really tending to your garden, right? That's such an important part in all of this,
I
especially
find
when
it
it comes to
interesting
coming
that
out.
I thought sorry to interrupt there, but I thought, oh, I
No,
can't
yeah.
miss this. That comparison is the thief. It's so
Hmm.
interesting to me. I think it's Eleanor Roosevelt who actually said that years ago. And to think
Hmm.
about the time frame that she brought that up, and then to put it into the context of, the Brene Browns of the world, the Eckhart Tolles, and the Oprah Super Soul set, such wise wisdom that actually just overlays what we're now talking about today. That this
Hmm.
comparison thing, which is now rampant. I mean, you just look at, I mean, I know I do it. I look at Instagram and go, well, why is that coach getting so many likes? And it just happens because this is
Hmm.
what we do as beautiful humans. What I also find interesting in the work that you do, I do it to some degree, is the ability to really help people realize you don't have to be that vulnerable and become a YouTube or Instagram or whatever TikToker to make yourself feel better. You just have to
Hmm.
be you. And I think that's where there's a lot of struggle these days. I know one of the things that you really work on too is like this identity. Who are you as a person? Who are you as an LGBTQ person? Not just, I know you don't just deal with LGBTQ, But I think this is one of the biggest questions of our time in history right now is, who are you? Like,
Hmm.
who are you really at the core? You're not what somebody else's Instagram. You're not your parents' identity of who you are. How do you really do? And I know we don't have enough time to talk about all that, but how do you help someone start to dig into that bigger question? Like, how do you help them grab onto who they truly are and their identity?
It's interesting because as much as, I think we learn by experience. When I start working with a client over time, we really start to understand, and I think this is one of the beauties of therapy, that we really start to understand what's the sort of underlying current. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the issues that people bring in, are upsetting, right? And I think we make space for that always. And oftentimes there's a theme, right? Or there are things happening underneath the surface. And therapy is a really good way of slowing down life, right? Where, especially in New York City, I mean, it's such a sort of hustle culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always on the go, 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 right? What's next? What's
Yep.
tomorrow? What does my calendar look like? And therapy can be a really good way of slowing down and really start to unpack and make
Mm-hmm.
meaning out of these different experiences. So, it's a gift, right? I think that we're able to sit with clients and really be uh, authentic and intentional about trying to make meaning. But I think that's what it's really all about is how do we make meaning from oftentimes these really terrible things that happen and oftentimes really joyful experiences. And ultimately putting words to those experiences, I think really starts to help us understand how we identify within ourselves.
One of the things I've been saying a lot to clients who come in and do an introductory like session with me is, think of coaching or therapy, because a lot of times I'll like,
Hmm.
oh, I think this is better to you'd be better off with a
Hmm.
therapist. But to think, and you said it you said just a minute ago, you brought up the whole mindfulness thing. I said, think about these experiences with a coach or a therapist is giving yourself the gift to really start to understand what mindfulness can do for your life.
Hmm.
Mindfulness about your thoughts, mindfulness about like exposing your feelings and being vulnerable, mindfulness about saying, yes, this is who I am. The mindfulness piece to start to open that up. And it's kind of a funky word. A lot of people are like, I don't really get it. What do you mean by this? I think it's such a beautiful thing to help people anybody start to go, here's what can happen for you. And it may be the 30 minutes out of a week, it may be an hour out of a week, the only hour out of your week that you get to go explore these sort of things, like your emotions, your mindfulness, like your intentions, your goals. It's different for coaching, because I'm always like, hey, I'm here, you're here, you want to get here, let's figure out how we do this, right? Let's like really, it's always forward momentum, kind of like taskmaster sort of accountability guy.
Hmm.
Yes, I dig in a little bit deeper, but I'm not going to cross the therapeutic boundary. What does mindfulness mean for you? I mean, I would love to kind of, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, like get that perspective from you for yourself.
Yeah, it really is about finding ways to come back into the moment, right? Back into the body. And, I oftentimes joke with clients too that meditation, for example, is just a form of mindfulness, but mindfulness itself is such an umbrella term. We can do it in so many different ways. When you're uh, driving to work, for example, right, just noticing the colors of the buildings you're passing or the texture of the wheel as you're holding it.
Mm-hmm.
These are just small mindful moments that I think can bring us back into the moment and oftentimes stop the racing thoughts, right? The sort of hamster on a wheel that keeps spinning in our minds. And oftentimes, if we let it go, it can go into really disturbing, sometimes really dark places.
Mm-hmm.
So finding these different ways of grounding or mindfulness, I think really just brings us back to the present, back into the body.
Mm-hmm. Now, last night I was woke up, couldn't sleep, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Right, the mind's just like,
Hmm.
okay, you're not gonna go sleep. I'm like, okay, then let's do something that I'm mindful about this. Let's just read. Let's
Yeah.
just give yourself permission to read. Of course, then we're getting ready to go on a LGBTQ cruise. So of course, all the parties are announced. So I'm like, well, I need to buy some stuff for the parties. But I'm like, okay, if you can't sleep, let's make this sleep productive. I did a little shopping on Amazon in the middle of the night last night. Of course, I'm tired
Hmm.
today, but I was like, you know what? As soon as I started like, oh, let's not focus on, oh, I'm not sleeping, I got to get sleep, this is ridiculous. I was tired within probably 20, 30 minutes after. I'm like,
Hmm.
cool, now let's go. And I know that's a kind of a weird example, guys, but that's what we mean. Like, become cognizant of what else you can do. That's what mindfulness is. Sometimes it's going to be just like, can I just be still?
Hmm.
Not hold yourself accountable, but like, can I just be still? I do 10 minutes of meditation a day at the evening and in the morning. And sometimes I'm just like, I'm just listening to the music. I'm not even doing anything else. Other times I'm doing a true, like, now do the breath and all.
Hmm.
It's such an interesting way to realize, ooh, I'm not thinking about work. Sometimes I am. But like when I start to slow it down, like, okay, I can just be here. And I think this is what
Hmm.
Lucas and I are both trying to share with you. And I want to really encourage any of you listening, like, there are avenues to getting the support you need. Yes, it may be a little challenging in these days and times, especially with insurance and everything, but take out some time, carve out some time. We're going to have Lucas's information on his website, especially if you're in the New York City area. Give yourself the gift of taking care of you. One last quick question, Lucas. What is the thing that you would say, if you could help kind of eradicate in the world right now from a mental health perspective? What would be one of the things you would love to be able to like help people really get past? Like just
Yeah,
obliterate it off the face of the earth.
I would say productivity. The idea that we have to always produce, that we have to always create something to hustle, right? To again keep going. I
Mm-hmm.
find so many examples, I think, of this in the clients that I work with. I oftentimes work with clients and I talk with them about internalized capitalism and how,
Mm.
again, we've been socialized that even internally we have to have this idea of producing more, right? Of generating content, of go, 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 keep hustling, keep going. And again, especially if we're talking about mindfulness, I mean, this is a sort of the direct opposite of that,
Right.
right? It's always focusing on the external, on the tomorrow, on the
Mm-hmm.
next, rather than the here, the now, the present. And I oftentimes even say that, rest is productive, right? How
Mm-hmm.
can we maybe integrate that in our day-to-day lives, and really try to, again, reverse this idea that we have to keep going, we have to keep doing more.
I agree. Actually, what I just brought up, guys, is a perfect example of it. I've been much more conscious about this particular vacation than I have the past ones, because I'm like, okay, there's a lot of different parties. I love a good party theme, but you know what? If I don't find anything, just go enjoy the party.
Hmm.
Just go enjoy the party. I mean, what I'm getting to experience is something that a lot of people never, some people never get to go on an all gay cruise. Some people never get to travel where I'm getting to travel. Embrace that and go, wow, I am very lucky. I'm very privileged to get to do that. If I don't have just the right outfit, then at least I got to do this. And I think sometimes
Hmm.
I love when you said this internalized capitalism. It was such a good thing to bring in right there at the end, because we have been sucked into this, like this,
Hmm.
and having to have the likes and all of these different things. And I love that you brought up that, like, obliterate productivity.
Hmm.
When I am at my worst, Lucas, it's because I'm like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to
Oh
get
yeah.
this, and then I am freaking miserable,
Yeah.
absolutely miserable. So
Yeah.
if somebody wants to connect with you, I mean, we're going to have it all available on the show pages and everything, but where's the best way to connect? What's your website?
Yeah, so you can look at my website, manhattantherapynyc.com.
Okay.
All of my contact information, my bio's on there, so you can read a little bit more about me and my practice, and also schedule a consultation directly on the website.
Very good. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing. And again, this is about, I realize this is July 4th, guys. It's about freedoms and celebrating freedoms. Please keep fighting for our freedoms. That's another thing, but don't let that fight get you into these anxiety and depressive
Hmm.
spaces. If you're feeling that because of this, highly, highly recommend get some support, because we are having some fights right now. We all know it. I don't even want to go there, but let's go celebrate the freedom. Free yourself up for some good mental health care. You will not regret it. And again, Lucas, thank you so much for being part of this and helping me reach the guys that are like, I just need something, but I don't know where to turn. So thanks for being here, man. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.